Alfred, welcome to the I Dare You podcast. You have no idea what an honor it is to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate you getting back to me. It's just about being able to sit here and be able to talk about it. So it's great. Thank you.
Well, Alfred, you heard a little bit of my introduction of you. And for the audience that doesn't know your background, I mean, what a story. And we'll talk about the book, Surviving with Grief, and your canine partner, Grief. What a beautiful, beautiful story. Before we get there, though, okay, you've got to talk to me here. What was there about the Marines? Why? Number one, why the military? Number two, why the Marines? Why not the Air Force?
It's interesting you said Air Force specifically because I go and talk into schools now, and a lot of people, I tell them I'm not a recruiter, but do the military. It's one of the best things you can do for your life. Get started, but don't do the Marine Corps. Do the Air Force. They got better food. They take care of you, and they care about education, promotion, all that stuff. So interesting you brought that up. Now, I didn't come from like a military background. A lot of guys I went to, boot camp with in the military, they had kind of like their dad went or grandfather, they're real gun ho. They woke up wanting to be a Marine. I didn't have that. My dad was a Villanova graduate. College, I went to private school my whole life, Catholic school. So college was always in my purview. But I just didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know what I wanted to study. So I went to talk to a recruiter. And as you know, they tell you, they pretty much paint this wonderful picture of, paying for college and traveling, seeing the world. And the Marine Corps, I think, was the only one working that day. So I got to talk to him, and I just love a challenge. And, I didn't even know what it was. I thought it was like Special Forces of the Army or something. Like I was very naive to the whole military thing.
Yeah.
And the uniform is what really sold me. So
Really?
So it was just the top tier. They always sold it as, we're number one, first one's in. And that's kind of what really appeased to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Okay, so let's level set here. So you were on deployment in Afghanistan, and from what I understand in reading your book, Surviving with Grief, this was the largest dog deployment in U.S. history. Did I read that right?
Correct. Since Vietnam.
Since
So
Vietnam.
yeah, so the big war in Vietnam, they had the big thing back then was sentry dogs. They would do a lot of patrols where they would look for guys. A lot of scouts were involved too. They do scouting where they were looking for individuals. But that was like the last recorded big group because back then we sent planes full of guys over there, and
Yeah.
which included big groups of dogs. And now it kind of like dwindled down. We had peacetime for a while. Global war on terrorism hit. But with how bad the war was getting and the need for IED dogs and
Oh,
the bomb threat, they basically said, "Hey, look, we need to dedicate a group of individuals who just train and deploy." So I was the very first one in our group, the 1MEF Marine Expeditionary Force. I remember getting my orders, and it didn't say military policeman. It said you're going to the MEF, which is this new group they were designing to basically just go do training surrounding the environment of Afghanistan. Back then it was more Iraq, and then it transferred. But that was the idea. And we went over there with 33 dogs. It was over 30 and a lot of individuals. And it was so you can imagine what that plane ride was like.
oh,
A lot of us were very young kids, most of which have never deployed to anywhere before. So it was a very unique group of individuals who had to grow up, very quickly overnight.
well, I cannot even imagine what that plane ride was like. 33 dogs, and I'm jumping ahead here. How many of those dogs and handlers made it back?
We had a few individuals who had deployed before. They were a part of those groups that went over to Iraq. The very first handler who was killed in Afghanistan was my good buddy, Corporal Max Donahue. He was one of our brothers. He did deploy to Iraq before. So his mentality going over there was a little bit different than us. We were a little bit more naive, but anxious and excited to make a difference. I think he had more of a level head on his shoulders, knowing what he was going to do. He knew the risk, and he was out on a patrol with a group of infantry guys, and he found IEDs, and unfortunately he lost his life. He was severely injured. He made it to Germany, but unfortunately succumbed to his injuries in Germany, and he's now with the Lord now. So
Yeah. That's a powerful story in your book about Max. I want you to connect the dots here for me. When you were talking about Max and all the handlers talking about what was happening, you're right. I wasn't doing enough and should be doing more. Kind of an insane way of thinking that you wouldn't mind being in that position as this was our job. It's an indescribable feeling having everything seem to work out in your favor as the larger plan still eluded me. One of my favorite poems that complements our situation is "Footprints in the Sand" by Mary Stevenson. So, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, Max clearly was a very, very important person in your life.
Yeah, so like we always like had this tight knit group. We had a tight knit bond. The Marine Corps is very small, but the canine world is even smaller.
Yeah,
Our job taught us to be very selfless, human beings, where other people meant more than us. And we went over there and we had to say goodbye to each other. We all had our own individual assignments, and we did our own thing. And then next thing you know, we get a phone call that this happened, and we get pulled back. For me personally, I can't speak for all the guys, but it made it very real. It made the sacrifice real. You see it sometimes in the news, you hear about it, but when it becomes your own brother and you lose that person, it's almost like a part of you is missing. But then I almost felt like he wasn't even gone. It just motivated us to go back out there and to fight harder. Like I said, we're
really.
standing there. I remember after his memorial, and we're all standing there with our heads down, and our fearless leader, our staff sergeant, came up to us and he was just like, "Hey, if you guys want to take some time off and grieve this, let it process." And every one of us was like, "No, get me back out there. I want to get back in the fight."
Is that right?
Because that kept Max alive. That knowing that, him being gone, I mean, we need two more handlers out there continuing to save lives. And then it took away the fear of death too. At least for me, again, I just felt like his presence was around us more. It felt like this was our job, and if it was our job to be out in front, and it winds up being our time, then that's what we're here to do. And that's what I meant by it just made me fight even harder to get back out there. It really changed the perspective of the whole deployment at that point. But to me, it was a very special moment.
Yeah, I can tell. You mentioned that you grew up in the Northeast, right? Am I right
Yes,
on
sir.
that?
Yep, New
Yeah.
Jersey.
Okay. Catholic school, and how important has faith been through your entire life? Did you grow up pretty strong in your faith?
Yes, I'd say. I mean, my dad was a very big believer, but we were, those, I want to say just Sunday Christians. I was in a Catholic school, but, you go to church. Anyone who's hearing this, who's Catholic, realizes that it's very structured, but there wasn't that relationship. There wasn't that understanding what it is to have a relationship with Jesus and God. And all these things kind of really expand your horizons when you step out of that comfort zone, going
Mm.
to even boot camp, where they say, "Hey, on Sunday you're not going to see your priest, you're going to whatever service there is," and you come together as a group of individuals, and it's a different environment, to be able to experience like the Lord's grace in different ways, and then to experience death situations. It really just grows your relationship with God that way.
Yeah.
So I definitely was around it. Faith was a huge part of it. I always had an idea of what God was, the idea that Jesus died for us, but the idea that it's more of a relationship. It's more of a real trust in Him. Not just praying when you need help about something, or like something good happens, you say, "Oh, thank God." It's more
Yeah.
of like really doing that day to day. And when you're overseas and every step you take might be your last, that definitely gets that relationship a lot closer.
No, I cannot. I cannot imagine your book, "Surviving with Grief." And by the way, grief is your dog, and I love the play on
Yes.
words here as well. By the way, just as an aside, best cover ever. In other
Oh,
words,
thank you very much.
the selection of that image. I'm just staring at it because the fact that you cannot see his face and the silhouette is just powerful.
Thank you very much. That was actually, wasn't even like, again, this book wasn't something I'd thought about overseas. That was a picture we took. We're laying on the side of the road. It was at night. The sun was setting a little bit. Where there's a big hill, and I just threw him up there. I'm like, this would be cool. Just take a
Yeah,
photo. And he sat there all, he was a very photogenic dog, and he sat there, and the sun was setting, and I always
yeah.
had like loved that. And then I took a picture, and as I was designing everything, I saw that picture, and I said, this has to be it. It's like when people, your family jokes, it's like, "Oh, that'll be at his funeral. That'll be
Yeah.
his funeral picture." Like, so that's how it happened. But yeah, I
Well,
appreciate that. So a lot
oh,
of times it was just surviving grief, and you have the original covered.
oh my gosh. Yeah, really, really, really cool. Your book is filled with so many just authentic, real statements, just powerful, poignant. Here's one that I want to read to you and to the audience. In the spirit of Footprints in the Sand, you write, "Life is just a walk on the beach. When the rough tide comes in and everything goes to, God will pick you up and carry you through it all. If we believe that He will be there to carry us, we'll never be afraid to keep walking." Why did you decide to put that paragraph in this book? It jumped out at me like a neon sign.
Yeah, it was again going back to the idea that we truly aren't alone. Like there was some times when I first went out on deployment, your first time out on the wire, outside the wire, where you're thinking like every step you're gonna die. And that goes away when complacency sets in. You get used to it. The day to day, you're like, okay, I made it through day 3. I'm not going to die. But then these other moments come up where like your buddy dies or like you're getting shot at, and then you have to really, really surrender yourself. Whenever you're going through a hard time, you really have to surrender yourself to that, whether it's a higher power, God, Jesus, whatever it may be for you. Once you do surrender that responsibility of taking your own life, it's a surreal experience to know that like it doesn't matter. I can focus on my job. I can live presently, and it's just all up to him. He is in control, and your life will drastically change if you can kind of adopt that in any way possible.
Yeah, well said. I love that perspective. All right, let's talk about grief. Tell me about the first time you met grief. Tell me about this incredible dog.
Yeah, so he was. I was a green handler, which means I didn't know much about canine. I didn't grow up with dogs. I was scared of them.
No?
No, I didn't have them. My dad didn't let us have them. Just I for whatever reason, and it wasn't until I like my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time, she had dogs, and it was like really bothersome to me as the barking, the hair. But I get to canine school, and I just get exposed to this, and I was still scared, and then even seeing grief in some of these other dogs, he was definitely a scary looking dog. He had this, mile long stare where it looked like he was going to rip your head off.
Really?
Yeah, he was kind of scary. No one really liked him. But I learned to love him. That's the thing that he taught me. He taught me how to love that experience people have with dogs. He was me. Everyone says, you have a heart dog. And he was my heart dog. He taught me what that bond was about, because I got to know those things about him that no one else knew. And it was like that connection, that bond. That's what we talk about in our industry, is like that bond saves lives. And it took a long time. I think he's
Yeah.
a stubborn German personality. And the fact that he was a little, kid at the time, he was 2 years old. And me not knowing anything about dogs, it was very difficult to kind of, break through those barriers of trust and get him to like me. But once it clicks, it's a huge experience for us. So
There's a story in your book about being in a firefight in Afghanistan, and bullets are whizzing all around you, and you look down, you look down at grief, and you just say, "How you doing, boy?" It's almost like you guys were at a park or
mm-hmm.
something.
Yep.
And I cannot imagine being in that situation. So even in those situations, grief and these canines are that type of demeanor.
Yes, and then we train him like through exposure training. We have him where we're shooting. He's next to me, attached, and we want to get him used to it.
Yeah,
But some of them just they'll lay there, and guys will tell you the same story. It's unbelievable how they just lay there and they're just happy. It's like he was in a different world, and that really broke me out of it because I was anxious, nervous, and
really.
my heart rate's up, and then I look down at him, and he's just looking back at me with the Kong in his mouth, and he's just like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm like, "Oh,
Unreal.
okay." And then you feel so much better. But
Yeah,
yeah, they're amazing. They to him it was a game.
yeah.
To us it was a job and war. But to him, he just was happy to go wherever we went as long as he got his toy and some playtime.
Alfred, one of the coolest things about your story is that it is a day by day description of what was happening. And I've never had that before. I've never read a book like this where it is a day to day description. In chapter 11, you talk about Stryker. And I'd like for you to describe what was that seemingly simple mission like and what happened?
So we were going out to do basically security or make sure the area was clear. There was Navy Seabees actually who were doing construction. I think there was some Army group there also helping them, but they were doing construction essentially, setting some up. We were just kind of scanning the area. I did a long area search. And then when we were done, we are waiting on the side, finding some shade. And over in the distance, there was a long road and it was just all desert. And then over the top of the desert was this tank-like vehicle, which the Army calls a Stryker vehicle. And as the vehicle starts to come over very slowly off in the distance, I'm watching it, and then it just disappears in a giant cloud of dirt and smoke. And I'm watching it happen, but I didn't hear anything. There was no sound yet. And then once the sound wave hits me and I hear it, another second goes by and I realize what happened.
No.
The vehicle was engulfed by an IED. I immediately knew now it was my job to search up to that way with our guys to try to help out in any way we can. And sometimes there were secondary IEDs. Now, meanwhile, I'm thinking if there's another one on this road that can take a vehicle out, like what would that do to me? But
No.
again, you just have to put it all to God and say, put your head down. You get your dog ready to go because, he's got to search. And as we're searching up to the vehicle, it was a very, very traumatic scene for me. I know a lot of guys probably experienced this too, but when you have debris from the vehicle and whoever may have been inside, it's very
Oh,
difficult to do that. And that was the hardest search I ever had to do.
oh
So
man.
to make, Grief again doesn't care. He's just out searching and trying to figure out what happened. But unfortunately, Specialist Joey Prentler was the driver, and he lost his life that day. He was
Oh,
hit by the ID and he was killed. And again, that was a tough loss. That deployment hurt a lot of guys over there, especially in that Army group. So I was happy that we were able to work with them. But yes, it was a very tough scene.
yeah. And so that you describe in the book about the feeling of walking through an active minefield. There's no words that can describe that.
Yes, I mean that's essentially what it was. Back in the day, there was different wars throughout history, in
Yeah.
Afghanistan, and I think there was Russian stuff, but they had stuff everywhere, like whether they're old mines or just IEDs that terrorists put there to get us. And sometimes these things don't work well, and they'll go off 2 months later. They might hit something, but like these anti-tank vehicles, they'll roll over something, and it's always around. And that's why our job was so important, and the need for them, because they had to get us over there, and it was just everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part.
So now let's talk then about what happened October 24th, 2010. You call it out as a chapter in the book, but tell us about that day, if you don't mind. Big day for you and obviously for in your life.
Yes. So it was October 24th. It was just like every other morning. We had a long mission planned. The idea was we were going to go out for about a week or two. And I went in, called my wife, told her I can't talk for a while, got to go pay the bills, and I'll
Hmm.
call you when I get back. So we went out. Luckily, they drove us out to the spot. We did a lot of searching here and there. We were with different groups, an engineer group and a tank group from the Marine Corps, also a big Army presence. And they were finding IEDs left and right. There was
Man.
one up in the side of the road that they found. They called it on the radio. Hey, we found another ID. Everybody just hang out. We're going to blow it up. And we're waiting against the wall. And they said, hey, we're going to do a controlled detonation. We're going to blow this ID up. Everybody move back, to a safer distance. So as I got up, I went to walk to my left. And after like the third step, an IED went off in a big boom. Dust and dirt went everywhere. And I turned around and Grief is just missing in this cloud of smoke. And I was like, well, he's obviously hurt. I'm trying to call him. He's not moving. But then what I found out was there was a giant crater and there was a kid inside the crater and he was wailing his arms and legs and screaming. And I thought this was odd. This isn't how IEDs work. But unfortunately, he fell into the hole. He was covered in blood and he
Oh,
seemed to be okay. So I posted up security. I'm just like, sitting there praying, waiting for an ambush to happen or something. And as they, got him out, they say, hey, we need to search an area for a medevac. So I take Grief out. We're searching an area. And as I'm waiting to, get the all clear, I hear that one of the other guys that we were with was killed.
oh,
And it happened to be the individual who was sitting right next to. He was right on top of an IED. And when we got up, he set it off, or it went
oh,
off. Yeah, and his name was Stephen DuPont. And he was right next to me. His last moments in his life were just playing with Grief. I mean, Grief was jumping all over his lap. He was petting him. And, we were just in a different world together. He was telling me about his dog back home. And, we were
oh,
just, it was a very surreal experience. But yeah, so they got him out of there along with the other one who was injured. And we were already done. I said, this is a brutal day. So we continue to search up. We try to get to another building. And as we get to this big building that had like 10-foot walls, but we wound up getting around to the back and there was a door and the door was locked, which is kind of weird for me in Afghanistan. Most of the time they had sheets or,
mm,
no doors at all sometimes.
yeah,
So this door was locked and we're trying to break into it. The captain I'm with is yanking on this door and he's pulling on. And, of course, my heart rate's up because I'm like, this might be booby trapped. I'd love to search it, but Grief was just near an explosion. So he's not working too well. So he starts yanking on the door. He throws the door down, and I had a camera with me. I took a picture of it for evidence, just because they were worried about certain things. And
hmm,
once I took a picture of it, I turned around and was going to walk back the other way. And then before I took my third step, the IED went off,
go,
and it blew me out. Initially, I thought I was dead. There was no question about it. I knew what the IEDs did to people. It definitely felt like I was dying. It was just nothing but a bright light. When you're staring into the sun with your eyes closed, it was just
yeah,
this glow and then this high pitched ringing sound. So I felt like I was floating up to heaven or something. And the first thing I thought was like, that was pretty easy. Dying is not bad. But that stopped and the spinning stopped. And then I started to hear voices and then I realized I was alive. And
mm,
then they did their best to patch me up and get out of there.
okay. And you write in the book that grief was gone. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
they called in the 9 line. They said, "Hey, we're going to call in the 9 line," and I hear on the radio, "Hey, there's one wounded and one killed."
yeah.
And I immediately thought it was somebody else. I thought it was one of the captains. I thought it was another guy. And in K9, we're very much aware of what happens. When people go down, people need to know what happens to our dogs when we get hurt. So they need to say, "Hey, know our commands. Come, go help this person." And I realized when they weren't calling his name, or they weren't addressing his needs, and nobody mentioned his name once, that's when I realized he was killed, and he was the
Unreal.
KIA.
Well, I'm very sorry for your loss. Even now, I mean, that's you honor grief with this book, and also, did I have the right Stephen Dupont? Did I get that
Yes.
name right?
Yep.
I
Absolutely. Yep.
mean, you honor Stephen Dupont and Max and so many others in this book. When I read it, I thought to myself, "This is a screenplay just waiting. This is, I mean, this is a movie waiting to be done." Have you ever been approached with that? I mean, it's striking.
Yes, not yet. I would love so, because this to me was always a project to get out. It started in therapy. What really started with my journaling overseas, just to keep a record of things to talk about when I got back.
Yeah.
But then I went to therapy when I was in the Wounded Warrior Battalion, and they say try to write down your events and how your feelings are. So it all came together in this story, and then I came up with the title, and everyone kept pushing me. They kicked me out of therapy, said go write a book. Everybody I was with over there said you should put it on paper. And then as I'm writing it, it definitely to me would make a better movie than book, because I'm not the best writer. This is the
Oh,
first. To me, I'm not a. I hated school, so I hated homework, and this was a task. But I'd love to. I have not been approached to answer your question.
well,
And if you get the right person on your podcast who's looking for the next big thing, then maybe we can make it happen. But
a gentleman's agreement to you and me. I've never served in the military. I don't pretend to have the guts to do that. But if there's ever a movie if you need someone to show up on set and just kind of like take care of some dogs, will you call me? Because I can do
absolutely,
that.
if I need help, yeah, absolutely. I have a nice inner circle that we're building here, so I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Will
yeah,
do.
please do. For the listener, Alfred was kind enough to send me his book, and he reached out via Instagram. We set it up. I'm so honored you reached out. But he sent me the book, and it arrived 24 hours ago. And I got home from work, and I showed it to my wife, and I grabbed a little dinner, and I went back in the patio, and I just started reading. I could not put it down. It is one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and so surviving with grief. It's really, really well done. Okay, Alfred. So let's talk about you. What kind of injuries did you have? Thank God you're alive. But what happened to you, sir?
Yeah, so I tell kind of not joke about it at all, but I feel like I had a lot of little injuries. To some guys, they most of the time they would lose two legs. That was very common the way the IEDs were placed, or
Right.
an arm or something. But I was very blessed and fortunate to have both legs, both arms. Initially, I had some, shrapnel to the face, a little, cuts here and there. My arms are a little messed up. It lost the pinky, which I realized is not important whatsoever. You only need it for drinking. That's all I realized. It's
That's funny.
for a cup of coffee or, looking fancy. You don't need
Yeah,
it.
that's good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, and I had some other injuries. My arm, this arm was blown in half. We called it the Humpty Dumpty surgery. I had a very great plastic surgeon who they basically take a part of your body and they patch it up with another one. It's called a flap or something.
Okay.
And it was a bunch of different little things. And I was in the hospital for about 33 days, just recouping. And it's amazing because a lot of the guys who lost two legs, they were almost out of there quicker than I was,
Really?
because it was an assembly line of just, the hospital was so overwhelmed, the ward was expanding, and they would patch them up once the bleeding stopped and they can move on to therapy, and they would have a much longer road of recovery with prosthetic fittings and stuff, but they were in and out of the hospital in 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I had an amazing individual, a Marshak captain who was one of my roommates, and he was slapping his nubs on his legs, doing crunches in the bed, and he goes, "I can't wait to get back out there." And I was like, "I can use some fresh air too," and he goes, "No, Afghanistan, I can't wait to go." And this guy built like differently. He
Yeah.
went back. He went back with no legs to Afghanistan.
Come on.
Yes. Oh, absolute warrior through and through. Yes. He was part of special operations, and those guys are built from a different cloth for sure.
No doubt about it. Are you
Yep.
kidding me?
Yep. And I give him a lot of credit. I personally, very honestly, probably couldn't. Whether injuries or not, but yes, he did. And a lot of guys do that. And
Yeah.
you'll ask any of them, Like Marcus Luttrell, it's in his book and his story. He did the same thing. He went through that whole experience and he went back himself. Like these guys, they itch for it. They're part of it.
Yeah,
They're built for it.
definitely a different breed. All right, so now back up here. So, Alfred, what is life like for you right now? What are you doing right now? And yeah, tell me about your family.
Yeah, so I mentioned it always sounds weird when I say it, but I mentioned my girlfriend then. It's still the same girl. I didn't have
Okay,
multiple relationships. Yeah.
Megan.
So yes, Megan. We met at Six Flags Great Adventure when we were teenagers, 14, 15, 16. I was getting out of high school. Um, you know, love at first sight, the whole cheesy thing. And I went in, did the whole service thing. I went in, did my 5, 6 years. When I got hurt, they opted to let me retire at that point or get out, or they said you can stay in and do something else. I couldn't do canine anymore, but they said you can do something else. And I said, if I'm not doing canine, I'm getting out. So I did opt to get out in 2012. I medically retired. And then
Okay,
at that point, I had a lot of therapy and things to do still, a little bit more rehabbing, coming home, trying to buy a house, which was difficult, just readjusting. I think it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And I was always struggling with the idea of fitting in, but also living this life as either a normal person or a wounded warrior. And it was very, very difficult. And I'll be honest with you, I'd be lying if it wasn't, but I still struggle to this day. And I know a lot of guys would agree that you go through these waves, these mountains and valleys of just you hit a peak, like, oh, I'm going to school, I'm getting good grades, and then school's over. What do I do in the summer?
really?
And then obviously COVID hit, and we all drank ourselves to oblivion, or at least I did. And you kind of find these ways to cope. And I realized down the road that you've got to really stay focused, because otherwise you'll get lost. And that lack of purpose ate me up a lot more than I thought it would.
Is that right?
Yes, yes. And it's still something I struggle with to this day. But I can tell you that I've did a lot of changes with my life. I've gotten to the point where I feel a purpose now. I just finished my associates after 10 years. I was like the oldest one in my class, of course. And
Way
then,
to go!
thank you. Thank you. Yes. I'm embarrassed to even hang it on the wall, but I'll
Not at all.
replace it with the next one. Yeah. So I'm going to, trying to get my bachelor's now in the fall. I'll be going to school in a week or two and trying to wrap that up. Still trying to figure out what to do with my life. But I work now at Six Flags to do human resources. I think just being in that department, I love the servicing people and helping. And
Good.
as a trainer, I love the training aspect. So we'll see. But doing that in the meantime, trying to just push the story out.
Yeah.
It was never about the money to begin with. And I think that as long as you push it, like, it was always about telling the stories of those who don't have a voice anymore. So for those individuals that you mentioned before, for
Yeah.
my buddy Grief, who couldn't talk to begin with, but
Right.
to tell his story and just to get that out there, because I wanted to create something that people can understand. I guess layman terms is a good way of putting it, but
Yeah.
like some of these military books are almost too technical, way too many F words,
Yeah.
and it's authentic and real. But I wanted something that everybody can read, really understand what these men and women went through. And that's really what it's about. It's just getting the story out and honoring the ones that didn't make it home, and maybe helping somebody who's grieving with something a little bit. I do a talk sometimes, and somebody will come up and be like, oh, I just lost my, golden retriever. She was
Hmm.
my heart dog. And, they just open up, and that's really what this is all about. So my real mission in life is hopefully to be able to make a difference in others. And, and along the way, maybe pay a bill or two. So that's it.
Well, just some feedback for you. You talk about the purpose. I appreciate how candid you are on that. We all struggle with that, whether we admit it or not, about why are we here? What are we doing with our time and our talents? And as you said, there are people who did not come home, friends, dear friends, who you're honoring in this book. What have you learned through your own journey about how to find that joy and purpose in life? No one's got this thing figured out. I just want to know,
Mhm.
what have you learned?
Yeah, so that's an interesting way of putting it. And it kind of reverts back to the faith and that walking on the beach and only seeing the one set of footprints. All of that has to do with that purpose thing. Like when you worry too much about what I'm doing and am I in control? When you worry too much about that, that's when those evil thoughts come in. Those
Mm,
lies that get you, like, you're not good enough. You're not good enough to do this. Oh, you're a failure. Oh, you didn't pass this test, or like, oh, you're not doing your job at work. But it's not really, if you go in with the attitude of I'm going to do my best at this, and even if I fail or don't succeed, it was still my purpose because I did my best. And I have
yeah,
faith that it meant something. It's for a reason. And I've learned that you have to have that. You have to revert back to that blind faith. And that really gets you through those moments of failure, because if you get through the valley, like there's going to be this beautiful thing at the end. Like after every rainstorm is a sunny day. All those cliche things you can say. It's very, very true.
Yeah.
It's not going to be dark forever. In the Marine Corps, we say pain is only temporary, and it's something. Once you push through it, you feel better at the end.
To the listeners out there, you don't have to have had Alfred's experience in Afghanistan as a Marine K9 team to understand what he's saying there. And I think that's a really, really great perspective for all of us. So thank you for sharing that. Wise words. Hey, Alfred, the name of the book is Surviving with Grief. You said it very eloquently a few minutes ago, but just one more time, why did you decide to write this book right now?
I decided to write it because it was a something that obviously was personal to me. It was a story that just kind of made sense. We always joked that Grief was the worst dog name we ever heard. But then, he of all the dogs, he was killed in action, and I dealt with my own feelings of grief and losing him. I cried 2 weeks later, and it hit me like a wall, and just flooded with emotion. And he taught me what it really is like to lose somebody that close to you in love. But it just made sense as far as the journaling and everything else, and just to be able to push out a story that honors those who don't have a voice anymore. There's that saying that says, like, you die once, then you die a second time when they stop saying your name.
Oh,
And when you got to constantly continue to tell it. And that's what my mission, I think part of my mission in life is.
yeah. Wow. There's this connection between dog and handler that no one really understands. And I've heard about this look, the look that the dog gives you, and you just know. And can you give me an example of maybe a moment or two that Grief and you truly connected and the look just said it all?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because a little while ago I just mentioned that Grief didn't have a voice. He couldn't talk. They don't speak. So a lot of our relationship is body language.
Hmm.
It's reading his change of behavior. That's how he tells me there's a bomb there. His tail will wag differently. His ears will move differently. His body will stiffen up. And
Really?
that change of behavior is what finds the bomb. And then that relationship, him telling me that unconscious, relationship, which is we call the bond, is what saves lives. And you hear that everyone knows that, what is it, 80-90% of communication is body language. So this bond, this unspoken relationship you're talking about, is the body language. It's the way I stand. If I stand a certain way, he reacts. If
Wow.
he looks a certain way, I know what he's saying to me. If his head points up to the sky, I know there's a bomb hidden high, not low.
Really?
So there's just that. So when you do this, if you imagine, if you have, think about your wife or like a really close friend you've had your whole life. Sometimes you can be together, and just the way you interact or move or look at each other, you're speaking to each other. That's
Sure.
that unspoken truth, that bond. And that's what I think that guy was referring to. It's that relationship. It's that thing you can't see, those intangibles, and that's what it is.
You mentioned a couple times that grief taught you a lot. What was the biggest thing that grief taught you about life or love?
Initially, patience, because I'd say sit, and he'd go, blah, 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 or throw the ball, and he wouldn't come back. So, taught me a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And then taught me slight German words. When I was in Afghanistan, I googled German commands, and I threw him a Platz or something, and he lays down, and I'm like, this is why you didn't listen to me. You speak German, you
I
dude.
love it. I love it.
Yeah, and then just ultimately love. I think he was the one of the first ones. I was a young kid. I went in there at 18, 19. I deployed. I got hurt at 20.
Whoa.
So it just love in general, just that, like we're talking about that bond, and knowing that he would do anything. It sounds so silly because he's just a dog, but he was my first heart dog. He taught me what it's like to love a dog. And he just taught me what it's like to unconditionally love somebody. It's something I can carry into my relationships with my wife, my friends, coworkers. It's why the canine guys are so close. We'll hug each other tight as heck, and we see each other at reunions because we know what that's like. We know what it's like at the other end of the leash. It's a very unselfish job, and it really teaches you about love. And we love each other to the end, to the death.
Unreal. Such an honor to have you here. By the way, on your book, the other thing I appreciated was just the photographs. I tell you what, I mean, you're a good looking guy now. I'm telling you though, in these pictures, you look like you and Grief were quite the duo there. And Grief was a good looking dog.
He
My
was cool.
gosh.
Yeah, he was a good-looking dog, photogenic. Yeah, I think I looked better than I actually was. I mean, I looked, those pictures, fool you. And I just always joke I had a good plastic surgeon in the hospital, so that's that's all it is. I tried to
Always
get Tom
humble.
Cruise face, but
Always humble. Hey, listen, what is the best way to follow you, sir, and everything that you or other organizations that are important in this journey? How can we follow you and others?
yes, I mean I'm only on Instagram now. I am at Sergeant Brenner on Instagram. Same thing for TikTok, but I'm not even on there because I think they're spying on us. But I'm trying. I'm trying to assimilate. I do have a website. It's survivingwithgrief.com. And just trying to keep a presence on there. I am on Amazon. The book is available on Amazon. That is the best way to purchase it. You can get signed copies off my website, like personalized. And then also another great organization, the gentleman in the book who was our kennel master, his name is Chris Willingham. He is the president of the United States War Dogs Association. And their job
Oh,
right now is to basically support, it was a group that started right after 9/11, and their group basically takes care of these dogs once they retire. Unfortunately, there isn't any funding to take care of them. So we have to raise the money, and they wind up supporting dogs who retire. And then they even take care of bereavement services. The big thing is their RX program. They take care of medicine, surgeries. So they're a good group. Check them out.
I will do. By the way, in the back of your book, I saw that supporting the United States War Dogs Association. By the way, again, I've mentioned a few times, I'm just so honored to have you on here. In this interview, you've been really open and honest. The book is just so revealing and such a glimpse into the relationships that are most important to you and honoring those that are not here any longer. And here's the spirit of my question. Is there anything that we have not had a chance to get into yet in this interview that you think I've missed or you really want to get out there for the audience to know about your book or about this journey that you've been on?
I appreciate that question. It's just I would love it if more people knew what we went through, and it's more relatable. Like I said, it's I speak to it from a very vulnerable perspective. I was very honest. I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to go kill bad guys.
No.
These were real feelings. I think more. The military is very small. There's a very portion of people who can do this, and I think that the unspoken majority doesn't get enough credit. I had a roommate who was dealing with so much at the hospital because he was next to somebody who was killed and he got slightly injured, but he carried a lot more inside. And there's these unspoken things, these things that people don't want to talk about, that I think we need to talk more about. Sharing stories, allowing people to be vulnerable and open. It's okay to bring your guard down a little bit to heal those wounds. Then you can build yourself back up. So I think that that's very important that we can talk more about this. Continue talking.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I mean, that's awesome. I think your book definitely does that. Surviving with grief. Alfred, you've listened to the podcast. You know what's coming. I'm going to be asking you in a second about your "I Dare You" challenge for all of us. It's that one thing that we could do or try to live a better life. And so, yeah, I think it's time. Let's ask the question. So, Alfred, what do you think? What's your "I Dare You" challenge for all of us?
Yeah, so I think you said I've listened to it. I knew it was coming. But I dare all of you. I dare your listeners. I dare you to live with a little bit more hope. I dare you to have hope. And to me, we love acronyms. I think HOPE stands for having an optimistic perspective on everything. So no matter what you're going through in life, try to see it from the other side. Try to just see that half full glass. Because even if it's the tiniest thing, if you're stuck in traffic or somebody bothered you at work, just think like, okay, well, they're dealing with it. They have a bad day. Or like maybe there's a car accident and someone else got hurt. I'm doing well. There's a positive perspective on everything. I promise you. I've learned that in a hard way, but I dare you to have a little bit of hope in your life. And that's going to kind of put those anxieties and those worries away.
I think that's a fantastic "I Dare You" challenge. That's a mic drop. "I Dare You" challenge. And I rarely ask a follow up, but I have to, sir, because you talked about hope. In your book, you talk about having an optimistic perspective on everything. And you also said, and I'm quoting here, no matter what situation you find yourself in, there will always be suffering much worse. And you have a prayer here: Lord, please watch over those who are suffering and thank you for the life I am given. And you go on. This simple prayer always helped me overcome sadness and self pity, especially when boots are still on the ground. Powerful words, Alfred. Powerful. Thank you so much for your "I Dare
Yeah.
You" challenge. Anything to add to that beautiful, beautiful prayer?
No, sir. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and I appreciate you reading that. I think that's it hit me. I'm not going to get emotional here, but you definitely hit me. I appreciate you sharing that to
You
people
got it.
because it's true.
Well, listen, it was a direct message from you and connecting with me, and I'm so glad you did. You have You have changed my life with the story of grief and the other individuals you mentioned in your book and you talk about in the podcast, and I'll never forget it. So I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing this. Everybody, if you're going to buy one book, it's got to be Surviving with Grief. The story is unbelievable, and I'm calling it here, Alfred. It's either a movie or a Netflix show or Amazon, whatever, but this thing is a story because it is so real. So really an honor to meet you, and thanks for coming on the show, Alfred.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that a lot. I thank you for the opportunity.